Vox emerged partly because of a donation outlawed Iranian military faction, Mujahideen Khalq. Okay, it emerged in Iraq in order to combat Iranians, and now through France, they sent almost €1 million to Vox when Vox was absolutely nothing. Diversity can drive innovation, creativity, mutual enrichment, and we're not condemned to conflict because of diversity. Ikhtilaf is the diversity is a concept, enshrined deeply within the Quranic text. Cervantes is the writer, the author of Don Quixote, and there are a lot of allegorical things there in order to criticize the fight of the Spanish crown against Muslims as something stupid, ridiculous.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to Muslims in Europe, Hisham.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wafik.
Sheikh Hisham, can you tell us about yourself? What are your roles? So I found you on Instagram. So can you tell us what are your roles? You're from Spain.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you so much, brother, for having me. One thing that I'm not is a sheikh. I don't consider myself a sheikh, but people know me for my dawah efforts in Spain and in Spanish. I came to Spain more than 20 years ago. And I came for studies, at university. I came to study at university here in Spain, to continue my Islamic studies and Arabic philology,
Mhm.
Arabic language and literature. And when I finished, straight away I started like getting involved with different mosques and Islamic centers. Later on, I started working with an Islamic channel in Spanish as a host, and yeah, that's how people started knowing about me, talking about Islam in Spanish, and that's about it. Yeah.
What brings you to Spain to study Islamic studies, Islamic philology?
Well, that's a long story, but to make it short, I was in the UK, then I had to go back to Morocco at the beginning of this century, let's say like 2001. And then I continued my studies and came to university because the city I was born in is Tetuan in the northernmost tip of Morocco, which is just a few miles away from Spain, and it has so many historical ties with Spain, which go back more than 800 years, because it was founded by a lot of Moriscos that,
Hmm.
like migrated or were exiled from Spain towards the north of Morocco, and they started founding these cities like Tetuan. They expanded Tangier and other major cities. So there are so many cultural and scholarly ties because a lot of scholars that lived in Tetuan were from Andalusian roots.
Hmm.
They were from Granada, Cordoba, Seville, or Jaén. And there was always this historical tie with Spain. So I came to the oldest university here in Spain, which is Salamanca. Of course, not counting the universities that existed in Al-Andalus,
Salamanca. I
which,
think I was in Salamanca. It's in the middle of Spain, right? A very hot
right,
place.
it's towards Portugal a little bit, towards the
Hmm.
west,
Merida,
you know.
close to Merida, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's north of Merida.
Yes.
So Salamanca is a university city. Life there revolves around the university, and it's
Hmm.
the oldest here in Spain and the third oldest university in Europe, after the University of Bologna in Italy and Paris. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was founded in 1218, which
Hmm.
is more than 800 years ago. So that's where I studied Arabic studies and Islamic studies. of course, a lot of my Islamic studies there, because in Morocco I used to study with different sheikhs and scholars, etc. But when I came, it gave me another perspective from an Orientalist point of
Mhm.
view, because a lot of people that taught me things about fiqh, for example, Islamic jurisprudence and other things, they themselves were trying to disintegrate everything about Islam and look into it in order to debunk it, you know. But it gave me a different perspective, a different view, and it was complementary to what I received from my sheikhs and scholars. Yeah,
But would you recommend people to go? Because my question was oriented towards like, what brings you to
yeah,
study in Spain particularly, and the sense like, is there Islamic education? Because people usually go to Eastern countries to study Islam.
right.
So do you think the curriculum is good enough for people to study Islamic studies in Salamanca University?
No, no.
Not really. Okay.
Look, if you don't have a previous
Foundation.
previous studies formation about Islam, then maybe it's not gonna do you any good, or maybe it's gonna even confuse you about a lot of things. So that's why I mentioned I already had studied with major sheikhs in Morocco, etc. So I was kind of mentally
Right.
protected. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, and also the information they give is quite deficient. So I had to dedicate a lot of time to do
Loaded
my
with
own.
prejudice, you see, right? You say,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. A lot of prejudice, a lot of, you know, ridiculous tropes about Islam and Muslims, and a reduction of Islamic history to, you know, two or three things that are completely out of place. But, you know, it gives you a lot of material, a lot of books, a lot of libraries, etc., to do your own research if you're interested in growing as a student of Islam. You know, it gives you that context. And also, I didn't study just Islam. I studied other, you know, another. Um, I studied the English literature also. So that was separate from my
Yeah,
Islamic studies.
philology, like because you said
Yeah,
Arabic philology, right? So it's a whole spectrum of not just Quran, but also different literature.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. From pre-Islamic times, you know, like
Hmm.
poetry, etc. So that's, you know, that's it. That's why I end up in Spain. But from minute one when I came here, my focus was also to demystify a lot of ideas that people had about Islam and Muslims, including my you know, my colleagues there at university, a lot of professors, I used to have a lot of conversations with them about these matters. So you can consider it dawah, because dawah is not an effort just to convert people to make them enter Islam, but also to change minds and open people's views about Islam in
Hmm.
general. Yeah.
It's a call, right? So here's my question. Do you think there is opportunity or room for, I mean, if there is a window for change in universities, do you think that's a possibility? Like these people can, the university professors can open up changing curriculums, like from learning from Muslims or even like Muslims coming and teaching, like just like Cambridge University or Oxford University, you have Muslim scholars, proper scholarship.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a possibility for, since Spain has a rich history with Islamic heritage,
Yeah.
do you think there's a possibility that they would open up to change, or do you think it's more about there's a lot of racism still and it's difficult?
I'm just gonna talk about Spain because I
Hmm.
really can't speak about other countries. But here in Spain, since I came, it has changed a lot.
Hmm.
When I came, um, you know, there were a lot of professors that were prejudiced about Islam, etc. Now, the person leading that faculty or that department, the department about Islamic studies, is a Muslim and a friend of mine, and he's a practicing Muslim,
Hmm.
and that 30 years ago was quite unimaginable, but now it's a reality. If we talk about other colleagues that I know in different universities, the University of Complutense here in Madrid, which is one of the biggest universities in Spain, or the University of Valencia or Seville or Malaga, etc. These universities, you have an increasing number of professors that either are Muslim or they are non-Muslims that have a complete different view about Islam and the Islamic history of Spain, because the traditional view about the coming of Muslims to Spain or the contact with Islam in 711, the year 711, was the view of an invasion. The Muslims
Mhm.
came to conquer, to invade, to pillage. And that has been challenged, repeatedly by a lot of scholars here in Spain, showing that it was not an invasion, it was an alliance between Muslims and a faction of Christians against another faction of Christians that were oppressing those
The
Christians.
Visigoths, yeah.
And the Jews also, they were being oppressed. So the Jews and the Unitarian Christians asked the Muslims to come and help them. So Spain was living a kind of civil war back then,
Mhm.
in the seventh and the beginning of the eighth century. The civil war was building because of a um, you know, different councils about the theology of Christianity, and Christianity here in Spain was divided between Trinitarians and Unitarians. The Trinitarians were Arians, the followers of Arius of Alexandria, and the Trinitarians were the
The Unitarians.
Roman Catholic Church.
Okay.
So there was this religious division, and Muslims had already been in contact commercially, etc., with the southern part of Spain, and subsequently they were asked to lend them a helping hand. And this is a fact now in universities. Anyone talking about an invasion in a like a huge number of soldiers or army, etc., they will be challenged quite easily. And there are a lot of books, a lot of literature, but by specialists in the matter, university teachers, that show that it wasn't the case. It wasn't an invasion. So this is just an
The sheer
example of how something that was given as a fact or now is being challenged, and an increasing number of university professors are writing and talking about it. Yeah,
inshallah. Alhamdulillah.
yeah.
So
Here in Madrid, for example,
mhm,
about 20 years ago, you wouldn't have heard a lot about the Islamic origins of Madrid, of the capital.
mhm.
And Madrid is the only Western, well, the only European capital that was founded by Muslims. The only European capital that was founded by Muslims is Madrid. If you go to Turkey or to Bosnia, Sarajevo, or well, Istanbul used
They
to
were
be
already
the capital.
established.
They were established before. Madrid was established from scratch by the Emir Muhammad the First. He was an emir sent by the the emir of Cordoba, because Cordoba back then depended
Hmm.
of the
That
Umayyad.
was where the Khilafah was, the
Yeah,
establishment. Yes.
it hadn't become a Khilafah yet, because
Okay.
later it was transformed into a Khilafah. That meant that Al-Andalus gained its independence from Damascus, from the
Abbasid
Umayyad
Empire.
Empire.
Okay. Okay.
So when there was a change of power in Damascus and the Abbasids took power,
Hmm.
then Al-Andalus detached itself from them. But back then it used to be an emirate, Imar, not
Hmm.
a khilaf. But Madrid was founded as a stronghold, as a fortress to defend a more important city that was
Toledo.
still is 80 kilometers to the south, which is Toledo, which used to be the capital of Spain even before Islam.
Hmm.
So back then, in the 90s or the early 2000s, you wouldn't hear a lot of people talking about the Islamic or origins of Spain. Nowadays, not only that, but with the city hall here in Spain, there are efforts to include different parts of the Islamic Madrid within the touristic tour of Madrid. And second, they have established its Islamic origins as something that nobody can contest. And Alhamdulillah, about 15 years ago, myself and another Spanish colleagues, we were the first two people to start talking about it on television, and
Oh,
that started normalizing this discourse within Spanish society. Yeah.
alhamdulillah. So, how was your experience once you went on national TV? Did you get a lot of backlash against the community, like the local community, or were they more like it was a learning, revealing moment for them?
Well, for the Muslim community, it was quite important to have a Muslim outlet in Spanish, especially because a lot of people don't speak Arabic, or the youth also are not very fluent in Arabic. When it comes to the wider Spanish society, you had mixed reactions. Some people saw it as a perfect opportunity to learn, to discover more things about Islam. Some people that are, entrenched in their hate towards Islam, etc. So they reacted in a different manner, less favorable manner. But that's something you take for granted. You can't, you know, there's a saying in English: if you can't stand the heat, don't go into the kitchen. So you take for granted that some people are going to react negatively. That comes with the job. It's not a problem.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, there was no backlash from the community, right? Like, as long
No,
as
no,
it
no.
was just in the internet and not like not like politicians coming up and like, reinforcing their views and attacking you personally or anything.
No, you had very
Little
uh,
backlashes, online backlashes.
yeah,
So,
yeah, just punctual, here and there, but nothing consistent within the community. The TV channel used to broadcast on satellite and also terrestrial here in Spain, in different cities. And now that TV station no longer exists because of different reasons. But now on national TV here in Spain, like the main channel,
hmm.
uh, Televisión Española, Spanish TV. On Sunday mornings, there's half an hour for information about Islam. Half an hour in the
Oh,
morning.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah, and I regularly feature on that space, that we have on national TV.
So how important do you think is that sphere, like Muslims engaging in those kind of spheres? Like
As
why do you felt like it was important to go and talk to non-Muslims on a television? Do you find any change, and what inspired you, first of all, let's say?
well, this program that we have on Spanish TV, this goes back to uh, an agreement that was signed in the 1990s, 1992,
Hmm.
between the Islamic Commission of Spain and the Spanish government. Not the Spanish government, the Spanish state. Even if the government changes, this agreement stays intact. Um, and that agreement, which is a law, it was, transformed into a law, um, enshrines, about 14 or 15 different rights that Muslims have here in Spain. So the right to worship, the right to, for example, have cemeteries, the right for Islamic assistance, in penitentiary institutions or at hospitals, etc. So different rights that Muslims have in Spain's religious rights, because the rest of rights and obligations are shared with the rest of citizens,
Hmm.
but these are specific religious Islamic rights are enshrined within this law. And one of them, was included this quota of time on national TV. So Jews have their program, Muslims have their program, and Protestants have their programs. And a larger program is for Catholics because
Understandable.
a large number of people here in Spain are either Catholic or define themselves out as traditionally Catholics.
Hmm.
They don't, no longer practice Catholicism, but they see themselves as descendants of Catholic people. Um, and I see it as something vital because first of all, it's symbolic. Uh, we are part of the wider community, wider society. We are Spanish citizens because some people have this confusion that if you are Muslim, you are an immigrant. If you are a Muslim, you cannot be a citizen, and that needs to be challenged, especially because since a few years ago, more than half the number of Muslims here in Spain, we're talking about 2.5 million Muslims here in Spain. More than half, more than 50% are citizens. They're not immigrants. They have their Spanish citizenship. And that is a very important statistic to point out to people that have this confusion. So symbolically, it's important. Also, it's important to have our own voice. The problem is, and this is something I underscore so many times on Spanish TV, etc., is that when they speak about Islam, they speak about us and not to us.
Hmm.
They don't speak to Muslims. They have these panels of so-called experts, that are talking about Islam, talking about political issues, religious issues, etc. They will comment on hijab, comment on Islamic education, comment on immigration, whatever, and comment on a huge spectrum of issues, and they seldom know exactly what they're talking about. So the importance of speaking to Muslims, because nobody knows Islam and the issues within the Islamic community better than Muslims themselves. So it is symbolic to have this space, and it's a call for people to speak to Muslims, not just to talk about them and repeat the same prejudice, the same stereotypes about us. Yes.
And do you feel like there has been a shift so far, like even if it's just half an hour, do you think there's a shift like where the Spanish community is has at least gained some knowledge about Islam? Like, mhm,
Yeah. I think when it comes to Islam, the Spanish society is quite divided
mhm,
because there is a shift within a huge number of people towards a more normalized view of Islam and Muslims. Um, but lately, the last less than 10 years, there was also a shift towards uh, a more close-minded view about Islam in another section of the of society, especially because a political party has emerged, which is a far right party. It's called Vox.
folks.
Yeah, and this party, uh, reproduces the same old tropes and hoaxes about Islam, Muslim, fake news, etc., about Islam, linking Muslims to delinquency, linking Islam to immigration, etc. Like Islam and Muslims are foreign, they cannot belong here, etc. We should tolerate them in some shape or form, but they will never belong to the society, etc. This discourse has been reinforced a lot, but by this
Here's
party,
my
and this has created a kind of schism within the society.
Here's my question about this far right party because Spain is very diverse. It's not like any other European country, as far I've noticed. You have the Catalonians, the Cantabria region, which has a different language. You have different languages, Galician. How does how does Vox, you know, y- because of the diversity, you cannot usually when you have a diverse population, you cannot hijack, nationalize, right? How do they succeed in that in this kind of one side of narrative? Because I'm assuming this is a more nationalistic
Yeah.
movement, so it could be concentrated in one particular area. How do they gain popularity in other regions? Or
Well,
are they?
they don't have any popularity in Catalonia or in the Basque Country, for example, or other areas where, especially these two or three, Galicia also, they have no importance there. Very minor role there. So these three areas, because they speak a different language
Mhm.
normally, Spanish is spoken everywhere you go. But if you go to the villages, etc., they tend to speak either Catalan,
Or their local language?
Euskera, which is the Basque, or Galician. You have other different languages, like Valencian, in Valencia,
Right.
etc. If it was up to Vox, they would cancel all that. Everybody needs to speak Spanish. They would revoke the right to teach in schools using those languages. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They have this totalitarian
Mm-hmm.
view of society. They have this
Very French model. Very
this
French
this
model, yeah.
yeah, and there's a huge relationship between especially this triad, Vox in Spain, Front National in France,
Mm-hmm.
and Viktor Orban in Hungary. These three are in
Mm-hmm.
constant dialogue about what the next move about Muslims should be. So they have a problem with diversity, whatever
You say
shape
this
or form it
happened, this
takes.
happened in the last 10 years. Is it because of any foreign influence where you have billionaires who are funneling money into it so they can push this narrative divide?
Well, that's a good question. Vox emerged partly because of a donation
Mm-hmm.
by this outlawed Iranian um, military faction. It's
Oh.
called Mujahideen Khalq. Okay, it emerged in Iraq in order to combat the Iranians, and now through France, they sent almost €1 million to Vox when Vox was absolutely nothing. It was unknown completely, and they also Vox has been tapping different views of Islam that already exist in the collective collective imaginary view of
What
Islam
is the
that
benefit? Like, how is an Iranian militia?
that's a huge, confusing combination. Also, I think the far right here in Spain and in different areas in Europe have had a lot to do with Zionism, worldwide.
Hmm.
Like Israel loves to throw more fuel to this kind of fires and divide people in order to distance societies from Islam and Muslims because one of their existential threats is that Islam is normalized and people start viewing Muslims as normal people and not as the scary terrorists, etc., that they want us to be. Because if Muslims are normalized and people are friendly with Islam and Muslims, etc., they no longer can sell to the Western, especially the
The war in the
bigger.
Middle East, like they can't
Yeah,
bring.
no, not just the war in the Middle East, that they are. the victims within a sea of fanatics that, want to first finish, Israel, and once they're done with Israel, they're going to attack Europe. This is what Netanyahu has been saying in the UN, and in every single visit he had to Europe. He's saying we are the dam, we are the protection
Depends.
that, yeah, defense that Europe has. Once they're done with us, they're gonna come for you. This is how they want to sell it here in Europe, and these little, well, not no longer little, because lately statistics have been showing that they have gained a lot of power here in Spain. About
You mean Vox?
16 or Vox, about 16 or 17% of people intend to vote for them in the next elections.
Is the Iranian militia still funding
No, no, that was punctual. That was at the beginning.
the
Yeah, yeah.
beginning? So now it's the
And, and
Zionists who are
and
pouring money.
and that has been established, and it was a huge scandal here in national media,
Hmm.
and they were talking about 800,000 euros that they received from this internationally banned group, because they were within the U.S. list of terrorist groups.
Hmm.
They received money from them. Then now you have the incipient scandal about how they are funneling public funds into a private foundation led by the president of the party. So this is the beginning of a new scandal. They have been through a lot of financial scandals, and one of the main things they have been talking about lately is the corruption of the Spanish government, because the Spanish government has been affected by one or two cases of financial scandals, and they have been tapping on that constantly, and people have been shifting their votes towards Vox because pretentiously they're saying we're the clean ones, we're the people that are going to save you from these corrupt traditional parties. But now they are in the bottom of a new scandal, and I think that's going to play very badly for them. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think there's potential? Do you think they might potentially not forget about potentially winning? Do you think there's a shift in the Spanish community? The people are voting for Vox maybe just because of economics or scandals, or is it more because of immigration and anti-immigration sentiments? Just like in Europe, you have the UK, France,
Yeah, yeah,
in Germany, you have AFD party. So, do you
yeah.
think the public is voting to Vox because of because of economic reasons or because of immigration
Both.
issues? Hmm.
No, not economic reasons. They're voting because the government has suffered from those two minor corruption problems that they had lately. Minor compared to other scandals that other parties have had in the
Hmm.
past. That's, I think, the number one reason why people are shifting their votes. But the other reason is that Vox has been repeating, you know, uns nonstop. They've been repeating that Muslims are coming here to invade you, to
Hmm.
take your jobs, etc. That's the second reason. According to polls that have been carried out here in Spain, those are the main two issues that worry the population here in Spain:
So, one is a
political
scandal and the
corruption and immigration. Yeah,
immigration. Okay.
yeah.
That's interesting. So,
But
sorry.
the Spanish society is falling for this discourse because, although anthropologically speaking, Spain is a very, very diverse country because of its position in the world. It's between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, and so many different peoples have been passing through this part of the
I
world
think
since
there is
the.
also the Andalusian reason when Andalusia existed,
Yeah,
people retained their language, unlike when the Roman Catholics, what do you call, conquered Germany, or I think there is different dynamics compared to how Muslims are tolerant towards linguistic
there's
diversity, right?
there's no comparison. I mean, when Islam governed not just Spain but other areas of the world, language, religion, it's a diversity
It retained.
between it was retained and it was encouraged. Uh,
Hmm.
Let me just give you two examples outside of Spain. For example, India, within before the British rule. India was ruled by Muslims, the Mughal Empire.
Hmm.
So that is an unprecedented and unheard of example of how a minority ruled over a majority that didn't share its own religious background, and they didn't force them to adopt it. So Muslims ruled over Hindus and Jainis and other religions, and they didn't force Islam on them. So that was, something unfathomable for a European, because there was always this supremacy. You have to adopt my views, my religion, my worldview. And the other example I was going to talk about is in general in Muslim countries, but especially I'm going to talk about Arab countries because in the Middle East, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, and even if you go
North
further to the
African.
west to reach Morocco,
Hmm.
um, you have a very high church per capita. Church per capita. It means that you have a huge number of churches for a relatively small number of Christians. While in Europe, you have a huge number of Muslims with a relatively small number of mosques. That's why here in Spain, for example, on Friday prayers, it's hard to fit into the mosques because there's a very important Muslim population, 2.5 millions, but they have these small and reduced number of mosques. I'm going to give you an example. Morocco, for example, which is just around the corner from Spain. The number of Christians in Morocco is, maximum. We're talking about 30,000 Christians, which are mainly French and Spanish and from other nationalities. They're not Moroccan Christians. And in Morocco, you have around 120, 130 churches. Many of them are cathedrals, huge churches. If you go to Rabat, Casablanca, Tangier has three or four churches. The area of Tetuan has two or three churches as well. So in cities where the number of Christians are a few hundreds, you have three or four major churches. So here in Spain, 30,000 Muslims are based just in one city or one town. For example, here in Madrid, the number of Muslims is around 300,000 Muslims. So 10 times the
Hmm.
number of Christians in the whole of Morocco are just in the Madrid area. If you go to Barcelona and the Catalan area, the number is doubles. We're talking about 600,000 Muslims. And still, Barcelona, a major city, the second biggest city in
Five,
Spain,
six mosques, right?
doesn't have a major mosque. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
have
doesn't it?
mosque. It has uh,
Small pockets.
little, Islamic centers and prayer rooms, etc. So the difference when it comes to the normalization of the other, of the different, is has no comparison between the Muslim countries and Western countries, especially if we talk about Spain. During centuries here in Spain, no other religion was tolerated. Only Catholicism. If you were a Christian but you were not Catholic, you were burnt at the stake. if you were Protestant, if you're Orthodox, you cannot practice your religion. If you are Christian, you're not
I mean, even
tolerated.
if you're Christian and you like diverge from the Catholic tradition, like if you take Galileo or Copernicus,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even if
You
you're
were
Catholic, you would be burned to stake.
executed, of course. Um, of course, Islam didn't disappear in Spain. I would say never. It never disappeared because you always had families that practiced Islam in an underground manner,
Secretly, yeah.
but secretly. Uh, but the date that is set as the fall of Islam here in Spain is 1492. The fall of Granada. But Granada was not conquered by the so-called Catholic kings. Fernando and Isabel. Granada recapitulated. You have this document in Spanish. It's called Las Recapitulaciones de Granada. Recapitulated in the sense we are going to give you the city of Granada, but in exchange, you are going to sign this document in which you take an oath to respect the religious liberties of Muslims in Granada so they can coexist with you and practice their religion with total freedom. Of course, that was not kept. The oath was taken by the two kings with the presence of all their cardinals or bishops, and the letter was sent to the Pope in order for the Pope also to
Testify.
you know, yeah, to give his protection to that oath. But the promise was not kept. After 1 year or 2 years, the Muslims of Granada were expelled from the city, and you no longer could practice Islam in Granada. And also, it's just amazing, in Granada. And just a few years later, after it was given to the Catholic kings, there was a huge scene in which they burnt all the Islamic books they found, not just in Granada but in other areas, surrounding areas of Granada, and in a square called Aramla, Plaza Aramla. Today it's called like that. There they burnt all the Mus'haf, all the Quran, and all the books about medicine, about astronomy. They were burnt in
Hmm.
a huge scene that would be equivalent to what the Nazis did, and the their burning of books, etc. So Spain had a very troublesome relationship with diversity, However, the point is, Islam didn't disappear. Muslims did live in other areas, but somewhat under subjugation. You could be a Muslim, but you were tied to a Christian lord or whatever, or in slavery, and that continued until the beginning of the 17th century, until 1609, 1610, and the King Philip III gave an order to expel any Morisco. Morisco doesn't mean Muslim any longer in that period of time. Morisco means an ex-Muslim, somebody that came from a Muslim family but now identified as Catholic. Even if you are Catholic, you cannot live in Spain because your parents or your great
So-called race.
great yeah, yeah, and that's a very accurate description because this was because of a law which was called literally Ley de Pureza de Sangre, the law of purity of the blood. Your blood is not sufficiently pure,
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of Muslims were expelled either to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, or other parts of the world, even to South America. Some of them reached South America, Moriscos that founded different cities there. And, it's a very sad page in the history, not just of Spain, of Europe as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. But do you think, because I want to connect back to the diversity of Spain, Spain being very diverse and folks struggling in these diverse regions. Do you think with what's happening in the UK, with all the riots in the UK, is affecting also the Spanish community?
Um, Before the riots in the UK, we had limited riots in an area of Spain, which is Murcia, especially one town, which is
Hmm.
Torre Pacheco, and the far right,
Is it because it's
so
in the south?
no, it's in the southeast, and there's a very important number of, uh, especially Moroccan Muslims living there. But there was an incident where an elderly person suffered an aggression. Somebody, beat them up, and they blamed two Muslim guys. I have no idea if they did it or not, but there was a call to all these far right hooligans to go there and persecute Muslims within that town. And that night was absolutely, there's no precedent to this incident. It's the first time that you see the far right movement persecuting people in the streets,
Hmm.
going after people and destroying restaurants or different shops, etc. And it was a night of probably curfew. People couldn't go out of their homes. And starting from that point, the government has been taking this matter into account and more seriously. They have been seeing these far right movements, especially the violent sections within them, because you can't say all of them are violent. You're talking about millions of people, but you do have some people that are ready to take violent actions against other innocent people. They
Innocent.
are starting to see it as terrorism, domestic terrorism, and that was before the riots in the UK. I don't think Spain has been affected as much by what's going on in the UK, and also what's the riots or the demonstrations that we saw in London, etc. It came out of the blue a little bit. The British public has been shocked by that. Huge numbers of people spewing that kind of hatred on the streets, etc. Some people have been shocked. That kind of shock has reached Spain as well.
Hmm.
But I would say that the right and the far right, because you have a traditional right uh, party, which is the popular party, the PP, we call it PP,
Hmm.
like those are the initials, and Vox, which is more to the right, the far right. They have been affected negatively by the genocide in Palestine. Why? Because both of them are the only two parties here in Spain that have been refusing
To call it a,
to call it a genocide.
okay.
And that has deteriorated their image in Spanish society. People are seeing them as the only ones that are back in a genocide in Palestine.
Hmm.
And that is very interesting. Talking about the genocide in Palestine, Spain has had a lot to do with Palestine historically. I would like to talk about that for a minute. One of the first Zionist movements that emerged in Spain back in the Middle Ages. Jews in Spain were talking about Palestine as a refuge for them. They were not telling Jews in Spain to go back to Palestine in order to colonize it,
Hmm.
but they were saying
To
You no
settle.
longer have a home here in Spain. Pack up your stuff and go where you belong, which is to Palestine. And there you're going to be protected by the Muslims. You had a lot of discourse back in the Middle Ages within the Jewish Andalusian community, telling them, especially when Andalus and Andalusian cities were falling one after another. You know, it started especially with Toledo, the major city that
Mm.
fell in 1085, and then other cities followed, and the last city to fall was Granada. But way before then, way before 1492, probably in the 12th and 13th century, you had Jews starting to say, "Let's go back, let's go to Palestine," especially after the fall of Toledo, because Toledo was a city where a lot of Jewish community coexisted with Muslims. Of course, when Toledo fell, they saw what's coming, and it was a matter of time until Jews were completely expelled,
Mhm.
especially in 1492 with the fall of Granada. Jews were no longer tolerated, unlike Muslims. Muslims were, quote, tolerated for another century or two. Then in 1492, something very interesting happened. With the fall of Granada, Christopher Columbus reached America.
Mhm.
But you know, if you scratch a little bit the surface of that uh, narrative that Christopher Columbus went to he's an Italian too, that went to the Spanish Catholic kings, Fernando and Isabel, and told them that, you need to fund me in order to find a different route to
To
India.
India.
He was going to India. No, no, that was not the only thing he said to the two kings. He also said, "We are done with the crusade at home,"
Mhm.
which is, let's go back 400 years before that.
Mhm.
The crusades that started going to Jerusalem had a lot to do with Spain. Why? Because the Pope, and that at that time he was Pope Urban II, a French Pope, and in the almost the border between Spain and France, he called for the first crusades against the Muslims to conquer Jerusalem.
Mhm.
But he said, if you cannot go there, if you are a French knight or a German knight or an English knight, etc., and you cannot afford to go there, or you have your own business going on here, etc., you can always go to Spain because there's another crusade going on down south,
Mhm.
but against the Muslims. He said that, it's as sacred to fight the Muslims in the south as
As
it
to
is
be
to fight
Jerusalem.
them in the east. That was the
Mhm.
discourse by the Pope Urban II. So that encouraged a lot of soldiers, etc., to come to Spain to fight along Spaniards against Muslims. Spaniards is a term that I'm using very loosely here because Spain as a nation didn't exist back then. Spain
Mhm.
as a nation emerges in the 16th century, so 600 years later.
Mhm.
Back then, you had what was called the kingdoms of the north. Kingdoms
Mhm.
of the north, which were north of Al-Andalus. You had Castile, Leon, you had Navarra, or the kingdom of Aragon. Different kingdoms united to fight a common enemy, which was divided back then. The Muslims were no longer a single Khilafah or emirate. They were what was called Reinos Taifas, the Taifa kingdoms.
Haifa.
Taifa comes from Taifa, which means a little kingdom, little section here
Mhm.
and there. So Muslims were fighting each other, were divided amongst each other, and they were quite an easy prey for those Christian kingdoms until the huge shift that took place in the 11th century uh, enters the stage the Almohad kingdom from North Africa. The
Mhm.
not the Almohad, sorry, the Almoravid kingdom. Before the Almohad, the Almoravid kingdom from North Africa, Almorabitin, came into action, and they conquered a lot of territories that were lost by the Muslims, and they established Islamic rule for another 200 or 300 years. Um,
Connecting back to Columbus, because you said they no
yeah,
longer
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
fight at home, right?
Yeah. That's very important because with Columbus, a lot of before Columbus, I was talking about Urban II, etc.
Hmm.
A lot of forces were going to the east and fighting south, Spaniards, and the Spaniards that went to Jerusalem or went to the east to Palestine, when they were kicked out by Saladin at the end of the day, 200 years, 150 years later. When they came back to Spain, they established temple orders, Ordenes Templarias, the Knight Templar orders. Some of the main ones are the Order of Calatrava and also the Order of Santiago. Santiago is the main patron saint of Spain, the patron saint of Spain. And Santiago is called Santiago Matamoros, which
Hmm.
means Santiago, the the Moor slayer, the Muslim slayer.
Hmm.
It's still called like that up until today. So when they came back, they established these orders of Templar knights, and that continued. The main focus of those orders is to fight the Muslims, and they established themselves in areas that are frontiers with the Muslims
Hmm.
until the fall of Granada. They played a major role in the fight against Muslims in this culture of the frontier. It's like in America when they were fighting the Native Americans pushing the frontier towards the west. Here it was a matter of pushing the frontier towards the south. With the fall of Granada, here comes Christopher Columbus speaking to the kings, saying, "Okay, we achieved our goal domestically. We have finished our crusades against the Muslims. Now it's time to regain the crusades towards the east, because the English and the French and the British the English and the French and the German have lost Jerusalem and other cities in Palestine. Now the Spaniards are the ones that are going to conquer Jerusalem. So in order to do so, I need to cut the Silk roads for Muslims and go straight to India in order to gain all the riches of India through a different
Route.
route. So that's how he sails in with the intention to reach India to gain money and gold in order to fund a crusade of Spaniards against Jerusalem, against Palestine, but he ends up in the wrong India, and he calls it the Indies, the West Indies, which
Yeah.
is America. Uh, in his epistles and in his letters, he calls it the new India. Something is not quite right, but maybe it's a different area of India. At the beginning, he is very confused, and as you see, it's very connected to the fall of Granada and to the fall of the Christian kingdoms in Palestine, and an effort of Columbus with the Catholic kings to regain Palestine, regain its influence there. So this idea of the Templar Knights and regaining Palestine for Christendom, etc., you know, has been retained by some people here in Spain, and today that's why they are not ready to recognize Israel as an occupying force, the genocide in Gaza, etc., because they are thinking, well, they deserve it, and it's part of our historical effort to regain Palestine for Christianity, and it's better if Zionism has it than if Muslims are independent and they are free in their own land. So it's all connected, you know.
Hmm.
And today that has not played right with the Spanish society. You know, Spain as a whole, you have seen, you know, the demonstrations, La Vuelta a España, which is a cycling competition here in Spain, has been interrupted in the last day. You know, they couldn't reach the finishing line. All that because mainly Spanish people, even if some of them are Islamophobic or they have the wrong idea about Islam, but when it comes to Spain, they have solidarity with Spain. I don't know why, don't ask me. It has also some historical explanation in my view. But to justify the genocide in Gaza is something that Spanish people said no, that we're not gonna take from you, and it has deteriorated their popularity here in Spain.
I've noticed, like especially Italy, Spain, and Ireland have been the three countries that have been very pro BDS. I mean,
Yeah,
although
yeah.
not the government, I'm not sure about the Italian government.
Yeah, Spain, the government has
It's
backed the cutting the ties and has like pushed for
suspended
that.
these.
Yeah, pushed for that, suspending it here nationally, but push for that within the European Commission, you know,
Yes, yes,
in
yes.
order for the European Union to suspend its fine,
Arms deal
yeah, its commerce
with Israel. Yes, I've
deals
noticed
with
that.
Israel.
But like I've
Yeah,
noticed like these three countries are the ones where the people are kind of very pro BDS and they're vocal about it. And they even vocal about
absolutely.
like the IDF
Yeah,
soldiers when they come in, they're you know they're
yeah, yeah,
pushing they're pushing that. So here's my question.
yeah,
Two questions I think are very important.
yeah.
Speaking of Palestine, how important is it for Muslims to actually lead that role because quite often it's usually the left leaning or progressives that lead this movement. And sometimes you have these brothers who are like hesitant to join these protests because of variety of people that does not align with our values. But and
Yeah.
I mean, aligning or not aligning, but sometimes I do feel like, when the progressives or the left leads the protest, they attach it to other movements. So, for example, the communism, or you have other different flags. It's not about solidarity, but it's more about here beyond solidarity. It's more about a different narrative, which sometimes it's not just about political things, but sometimes you've heard of the left leaning at the very beginning when the Muslims were against not just normalizing ceasefire, but to free Palestine. But the left
Yeah,
was like, no, we need to cease fire. But
yeah,
ceasefire was not the issue.
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
apartheid state was the issue. So quite often the left does not understand the Muslim voices and how
Mm.
important is it for Muslims to actually lead the role to for them to understand, hey, you don't understand the problem, you're new to it. We know this
Yeah.
issue for 75 years. So
Yes,
it's not a criticism of like the left not coming. It's just like they sometimes they don't understand, but they want to lead, and you get
yeah, yeah.
where I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it's vital for Muslims to give their input into this issue. I personally have done it since I came to Spain, you know, but especially since 2007. I remember, a few days ago, I shared on social media some articles, etc., from 2009, you know. So more than 15, well, yeah, more than 15 years ago, in a tiny city in Spain, one of the smallest cities here in Spain. I used to be part of the local mosque there, and we organized this march, you know, although we were 300 people, you know, at most, but we marched through the city, a small city, uh, calling for the end of Israeli genocide. We were calling it genocide back then.
Hmm.
And that started a platform within the city, a platform of different components, some from the left, some from the right, some from the Christian church, the Catholic church, some are from the Muslim community, etc. So we were sitting at, around the same table talking about the issue, and Muslims were given their view, and the view was heard, and a lot of people were misinformed about the issue, and we started organizing different lectures, different meetings, etc., in order to raise awareness about the issue. So that's a miniature effort in a small city in Spain. When it was done in a wider
Scale.
spectrum, yeah, it did give huge results. I'm going to give you an example. The current president of the government here in Spain, like the first minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, I met him and sat with him, talked to him before he was a president.
Hmm.
That was in 2014, probably, or
I've
15.
seen that on your Instagram wall.
Right. That meeting changed a lot of views he had about the Muslim communities here in Spain.
Hmm.
Because once he hears from Muslims, instead of hearing about Muslims from his, staff or whatever, it is a game changer. Um, and lately, when the current genocidal aggression of Israel against Gaza started, he asked us to go and meet him, you know, and talk to him about what's going on in Gaza, etc. And it was our proposal for him to meet the Palestinian ambassador here in Spain. We said, okay, we are a religious
Organization.
institution
Hmm.
organization. So for you to talk about more political issues, it would be very suitable, very
Vital to
interesting to,
talk with. Hmm.
yeah, to talk to the ambassador, and he did, So sometimes you can propose things, you can change views, you can correct a lot of false
Here's my
information, etc.
Here's my thing. I've noticed from American Muslims who talk about, yes, we have reached out to the left-leaning spectrum of politics, but we hardly engage with the right. Do you think the Muslims are engaging, or you yourself, you're engaging with the right? Because you've sat down with Pedro Sanchez and you
Yeah.
spoke to him. Do you think they're also Muslims engaging with the right side of the spectrum?
Yeah, I would presume so. I do think that within the right, there is a very substantial percentage of people that are uh, against what Israel is doing, against occupation, etc. But the right now has, look, Spanish politics right now is in a very difficult area in
Hmm.
which you are either with me or against me. Pedro Sanchez has been like the current president of the government in Spain has been established as the enemy of the right, and for you to adopt any view which is similar to him, for example,
Hmm.
showing any solidarity towards Palestinians or any refusal towards the genocide committed by Israel, etc., would make you seem lenient with him or resemble him in any shape or form. So that's why the issue is so divisive. But the right here in Spain traditionally has been very lenient toward Palestine
Hmm.
more than Israel until 20 years ago when Israel has been lobbying a lot here in Spain. That's when the right has shifted. By traditionally, historically, the right has been very lenient and very just in this cause and has backed Palestine more than any other part. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So, I guess I will conclude here. Inshallah, I'll put your info in the YouTube description. Do you have any additional point that you want to add?
Um, no, I would conclude by saying that our effort here is also to raise awareness towards the richness of Islamic history here in Spain. In Spain, when they talk about, they do recognize, of course, the importance of Islam and Muslims in the, history of the country, etc. But it's the view is very poor.
Mhm.
Especially in Spanish education. When they talk about Spanish history, they would dedicate maybe a page or two to talk about
Oh
Spanish
my God, 800 years of history, a page or
more
two.
than 800. Look, that's why I said 1492 was not the end of Spanish influence here in Spain. It's rather the 17th century. That's when, in reality, Muslims are finally expelled, and they suffer what I would say the final solution. Like the Holocaust, Muslims here suffered a huge, dramatic exile. Um, so the thing is, we should focus about Muslim Muslim scientists. You have so many, tens and hundreds of scientists. When if you talk about astronomy, Maslam al-Madriti, the first Madrid-based astronomer. If you talk about Zarqali, these people changed absolutely how science was done in Europe.
Hmm.
You know, you would never have Galileo Galilei or Copernicus or anything unless you had these people. They took exactly what these people were saying and translated it into Latin and from Latin to Italian, etc. Without the birth of Islam here in Spain, you would not have the rebirth. Rebirth is the Renaissance. Renaissance is
Is with them.
translated as rebirth. The Renaissance in France or Italy or um, other areas of Europe would have never been possible unless you take into account these brilliant, brilliant philosophers, astronomers, Ibn Majah, Ibn Masarra. If you talk about Zarqali in Toledo, you have so many different physicians, different doctors. If you talk about Ibn Tufayl, the huge humanist philosopher, humanism, today we talk about humanistic Europe. It talks about the centrality of the human being as the center of truth, etc. No, no, that was not talked about until Abu Ibn Tufayl wrote his masterpiece, which is Hayy ibn Yaqzan, which was translated into Spanish with a completely different title, the self-learning philosopher, and
Hmm.
it talks about even Kipling wrote the Book of the Jungle, based on that book, based on that book, and it's based on an Islamic notion of fitra. Fitra is the truth within the human being, and it's a brilliant way of putting it through this fable. He
Hmm.
was he was talking about humanism. So all that huge heritage, so many books in so many different areas of science, jurisprudence. If you talk about Ibn Rushd, Averroes, if you talk about the brilliant mind of Ibn Hazm, all of that was translated in Toledo in the Escuela de Traductores, the School of Translators. So all these scholars and philosophers, um, Europe owes them a lot. Even Greek philosophers wouldn't have been known unless we take into account the translations of all their works from Greek to Arabic first, and from Arabic to Latin, and then to all the different European languages. If we talk about Averroes, if we talk about, for example, talking about astronomy, al-Bitruji, or Ibn Khalaf al-Muradi, or so many different uh, scientists that lived in Toledo and Seville and Cordoba and Ronda, the first person that tried to fly, Abbas ibn Farnas, lived in a tiny city and now in the region of Malaga, and he, his artifacts, the clockwork of the artifacts he made, etc. It was so far ahead of their time. So when Europeans started translating that and finding out what these people had to say, it was revolutionary in the term, in the sense of a scientific revolution that Europe had never
Do you
seen
think
before. Uh,
sorry,
yeah, yeah, go
do
ahead,
you
please.
think like, because when you go to museums, like usually Europe has a fascination about the first clock, the first steam engine, the first. So, do you
Yes.
think these inventions are also celebrated and their names are celebrated, or usually they keep it hidden and under the rug?
Yeah, they don't take into account um, the Islamic scientists, the Islamic thinkers, the Islamic intellectuals. If you go, for example, here in Europe, to a lecture about the history of philosophy in Europe, they're not going to talk a lot about uh, Averroes or Ibn Tufayl or Ibn Masarra, etc. And seriously, what these people had to say is hugely more interesting from my point of view than a lot of other people that came after, even the 20th century. If you read their books, if you read their manuscripts, you just are mesmerized. You say, these people are genius. It's a genius speaking before you. They don't take into account. If you go to a museum about, for example, about astronomy anywhere in Europe, you're not going to find them talking a lot about Muslim astronomers here in Europe. And everything they discovered after, is owed to the models, to the instruments, etc., introduced by those astronomers. So when they talk about astronomy, for example, just an example, in Europe, they don't take into account Islam in Spain because they think it's not part of the history of Europe. You know, while we're here to challenge that view and say Muslims in Spain are European Muslims. Actually, this is something the far right has a lot in common with some views within the Muslim community. Within the Muslim community and Muslim countries, we think that Muslims in Spain were Arabs,
No.
that came, yeah, that came, and they were ethnically and linguistically Arab people, and they went back from where they came. That's the view in a lot of Muslim countries, and that's the view within people
Unfortunately,
that
yes.
intend to alienate Muslims here in Spain. That is not true. Actually, a lot of far right people say, well, we have carried out these tests, DNA tests. There was this the scientific experiment here in Spain to see the DNA of Spanish society, and they found that a lot of people didn't have the presence of Arab or Middle Eastern DNA. So that is absolutely natural. Why? Because mostly the people within Al-Andalus were autochthonous. We are indigenous to Spain. They were Spaniards before Spain even existed. I don't call them Spaniards. I call them Iberian
Mm-hmm.
because Iberian Peninsula, that's a geographical space, no matter what countries, nations come and go. So they were our Iberian Muslims, Iberian Jews, and it's normal that you don't find the trace or a percentage of Middle Eastern DNA. So to go back to the point, we need to show how Al Andalus was a place of interaction between Muslims and Christians. We need to show how Al-Andalus was a space where Muslims, Christians, and Jews interacted, and Europe benefited a lot from that period of time. Um,
In other words, you can say Andalusia is a role model, is a model, a blueprint for tolerance in Europe. So because Europe is suffering from multiculturalism right now, because they always say like the far right is always saying right now is multiculturalism has failed. I think Andalusia has been a can be a blueprint for modern Europe to learn
absolutely.
how to be tolerant.
It was not always idyllic. It was not a paradise. It was not the case, but it was, I would say, drastically different from the rest of Europe. If you don't think so, see what was going on in Spain before the coming of Islam and after. You know, before the coming of Islam, they were killing each other within the Christian
You know,
denominations.
we often go back to, I think there, I mean, sorry, to stop here, but like, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
even the tolerance between during the Andalusian period and the modern world, the modern society, like
No
just
comparison.
the example you just gave me of the churches and the mosques, that itself is a simple example of, how tolerant was the Andalusian model versus the nation state model.
Absolutely. If you go to Cordoba or you go to any other Saragossa, we always talk about Cordoba and Granada, the main two
Yes.
cities, Cordoba because it was the capital, Granada the last to fall. But you have hundreds of cities and towns, even tiny towns, where you had a synagogue, a church, a mosque, and everything was normal. You could be Christian, Jew, Muslim, and it was absolutely normalized. And there was no documented persecution within the Islamic history of Spain to other religions, to Christians or Jews. There's no documented persecution. After the fall of Granada, persecution started systematically. You have, of course, um, the Inquisition that orchestrated mass executions of people that didn't conform to the
Mm.
doctrine of the Christian church. So we need to go back and see what was really going on. And each time we we investigate that period of history more, we come up with new findings, new discoveries that reinforce even further the view and the image of tolerance and of coexistence back then. Yeah.
How, I mean, since you're on TV, do you think, how do you think Muslims can actually reclaim that narrative? Like, no, we Muslims have contributed. We're not like outsiders. We are part of Spain, and that has contributed and also benefited this land. So prehistoric during Andalusia times, but also now, like instead of the invader version, just like Andalusia was developed by Muslims and what do you call
Yeah.
flourished by Muslims. We
Yeah.
Muslims are here to flourish again. So
Yeah.
how do you think we can work to that
Well,
narrative?
yeah. That narrative is important, and it needs to underscore the fact that we are not condemned within this unavoidable diversity. Diversity is there to stay, you know. Anybody that thinks that the world is going to be uniform and we're going to think alike, etc., is just living in a parallel universe. And this is the Quranic. The Quran establishes diversity as the natural state of the universe. Nature is diverse. Human societies are diverse. Ikhtilaf is the diversity, is a concept, enshrined deeply within the Quranic text. So the lesson is that diversity can drive innovation, creativity, mutual enrichment, and we're not condemned to conflict because of diversity. Conflict is not related to diversity. Conflict is related to a discourse that
Disparity.
manipulates
Sorry?
manipulates
Hmm.
things, exaggerates problems, and also because of disparity, the lack of equality, is also within that the factors that push us towards social and political conflicts. But diversity is not the one to blame. So Europe could draw an inspiration from its history. When we talk about the history of Islam in Spain, we're not talking about a foreign history. It's its own history and its own memory, and it could embrace diversity not as a force that pushes us towards conflict, but as an opportunity to understand each other and to reach mutual enrichments. Also something very important, diversity can never push us towards assimilation. Europe is deeply obsessed with assimilating. I think it's also, with all due respect, it's also based on a biblical view of things. Because the Bible in Genesis talks about the human being, in Spanish we say, imagen y semejanza, like resembles, has the image of God, the human being. That's within
The
the
Bible.
biblical view of mankind. And the West has always established itself as a godly entity, and the rest of the world should have the same shape, the same resemblance as that self entitled
This is very much
God.
like Nietzsche. You're touching on Nietzsche,
Yeah, yeah,
where the human beings become the gods. Yeah.
yeah. The Übermensch
Yes.
of Friedrich Nietzsche. Although, talk about Nietzsche, and I'm an avid reader of Nietzsche. I used to be, I read all his books, etc. And some things in his like worldview is quite interesting. And I think Muhammad Iqbal, took a lot of things from Nietzsche and gave it an Islamic input. But Nietzsche criticized the church, Judaism. He criticized Judaism quite harshly, etc. But when it came to Islam, Nietzsche had nothing but beautiful things to say about Islam. If you go to his book, he has a book called the Antichrist. If you go to, I think around page 60 something,
A
60,
beautiful memory,
65.
mashallah. Like you know the
Yeah,
page
because
number.
those are two or three pages that I almost
Bookmarked it.
memorize.
Okay, you memorized. Nice.
Yeah, he's lamenting, he shows sadness why Al-Andalus didn't reach Germany.
Hmm.
He said, if only they could have reached us, we would have been so much better off. And he criticizes the German society in some very, very harsh terms and said, the only salvation that we had is Islam, and we fought against that which we didn't even understand, which is Islam. We couldn't reach uh, even the lowest level of understanding of Islam, and that's why we fought it. And we ended up expelling Muslims from Spain. If only we welcomed them into Germany, etc. So Nietzsche and Nietzsche also lived within a period in Germany which had a lot of thinkers in Germany had a huge fascination with Islam. Goethe,
Got
for
it.
example. Some people even talk about him. adopting Islam and being
Yeah.
Muslim, and I think they're not very far off, because some of his writings he
Expresses his views towards the
yeah,
Prophet.
he expresses himself as being Muslim, and he learned Arabic in order to read the Quran, etc. And he says, "I believe in Allah and I believe in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him," etc. That's your shahada in some way or another. So Europe needs to draw some inspiration
Yeah,
from all
these are
those
the things
those
that are
countries.
sidelined, right? Like Goethe. We don't really study about Goethe.
No,
We,
yeah, we
unfortunately.
yeah. For example, here in Spain. The Goethe of Spain or the Shakespeare in Spain. Actually, he died the same year as William Shakespeare is Cervantes. He's the you know the most famous Spanish writer. Cervantes. Where can I start to just show you the relationship between Cervantes and Islam and Muslims? Cervantes spent years as a captive in in Algeria, and he learned a lot about Muslims, etc. And when he comes to Spain and writes his masterpiece, Don Quixote.
Oh yeah, Don Quixote. Yes, okay.
Yeah, he's the writer, the author of Don Quixote. He starts by saying, "This is a story told to me by a Muslim from such and such a city, etc." He puts it in the mouth of a Muslim, and there are a lot of allegorical things there in order to criticize the fight of the Spanish crown against Muslims as something stupid, ridiculous that they shouldn't be doing. Fighting Muslims, fighting Islam, in Cervantes' view, was something absolutely stupid, and
So
he
you say
he
Sarah Bunter was what do you call it, sympathetic to the Muslims?
absolutely. I have absolutely no doubt about that. He had his here and there you see some prejudice, some false ideas about Islam, Muslims,
Same
etc.
thing with Dante. The same thing with Dante. They
Same
have to
thing
force it.
with
Yes.
Shakespeare. Shakespeare, for example, if you read Othello, that's a criticism directed to Europe's envy. He talks about envy in Othello. Othello is a Muslim.
Hmm.
And Othello is the word Utayl in Arabic. He's a Muslim in Italy, the admiral of, the army, or the you know sea force there in Italy. And Othello is a Muslim, Othello the Moor. That's
The Moor. Okay,
the
so
the title.
Andalusian to be
The
I
title is
think
Othello the Moor.
the Moor.
Okay,
Okay.
so he's a Muslim. Originally, I think he's from Tunisia or something like that, and he's not accepted in Italy, even though he has a very, very, very powerful military and political range within the society. A lot of people feel envy. Why him? This Moor, this Arab, this Muslim, etc. So he's talking about things that are shaping politics there. And also, some historians say that Othello is based on the visit of the first Moroccan ambassador to the
Elizabeth,
court.
Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that has its own context. Spain and Portugal are trying to conquer Morocco. They suffer a huge they are defeated, a huge defeat there, and England starts searching the way into establishing political or
Connections with the Muslims.
relationships with Morocco, and Morocco sends the first ambassador from Fez,
Hmm.
from Fez, and there's a drawing of him in when he arrives in London, and that was at the time when Shakespeare was writing his novels, and he writes about him under the name Othello. But the name Othello, sorry, the The arch enemy of Othello within that story is called Tiago. Tiago. Tiago, it comes from Santiago in Spain.
Spanish name. Yeah.
Santiago, I just mentioned him, the patron saint of Spain, which is called Santiago Matamoros, Santiago the Moor Slayer. So
Yeah, Shakespeare
he's
always baffles. That's true.
yeah, his
His
very
works are like that. Yes.
and that novel by Shakespeare is very interesting because it taps on a lot of motivations why Europe, starting from Spain and Italy. Italy because it has a Muslim history. You know, a huge part of Italy was ruled by Muslims, and a lot of Muslims from Spain flee to Italy when they are persecuted here, first to Italy, and then when they're persecuted there, they flee to northern Africa. Italy and Spain have this very problematic relationship with Islam, but Shakespeare taps and um, investigates the main motivations that push that hate and that persecution of Muslims. So I think when we study Shakespeare, when we study Cervantes in Spanish, when we study Dante, Dante the Divine Comedy
Mhm.
is just stolen from Risalat al-Ghufran by Ibn al-Muqaffa in the Middle East in Arabic. And also here in Spain, there's another novel by an Andalusian philosopher that he takes and makes as his own. And all of them are based on the nightly journey of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Isra and the Mi'raj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you study Goethe, if you the main writers in different languages, they have in some way or another some relationship with Islam and Muslims here in Europe. So I think Europe needs to start coming to
Rediscovering
terms,
its own history.
coming to terms with its own history, and
Mhm.
unless they stop seeing Islam as something alien, as something antagonically, uh,
Antithetical, more like
yeah, yeah,
clashes. You
clashes with the identity, etc. Here in Europe. They're not going to understand their own identity, their own history, and we're going to suffer from this hallucination and this um, disorientation, which we see clearly
Do you
both in the far right here, or if you go to England or anywhere you go.
do you think it's also a part because I was just recently traveling across France and
Yeah,
Spain, and what I found meeting people from Occitan and Breton, you know the
yeah, yeah,
French
yeah,
identity.
yeah, yeah,
What I learned was like the French identity was pushed, shoved onto those people. The
yeah,
French identity, like from
yeah,
stealing away their own identity.
yeah,
And do you think that's the far right narrative, like where they steal away the Catalonian, the Galician, the Escutorian identity, just to shove down this Spanish nationalist identity, where people become blank slates, so
yeah.
you can rewrite their identity as you wish.
No doubt that's part of the problem. Uh, Spain was ruled by a dictatorship from the 1930s, 1939 until 1975. The same guy, Francisco Franco, the
Mhm.
dictator of Spain. Also, the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939. We have a lot to discuss when it comes to those 3 years because 100,000 Moroccans were brought from Morocco to fight that civil war in which they had no stake. So that created a vision of Muslims as it reinforced that vision of Muslims as the invaders, as the
Mm.
people that came and they won the war for Franco. That is absolutely a fact. They fought viciously in that war, and that has been very problematic when it comes to the history of the 21st the 20th century in Spain. Going back to Because every time something comes up, we need to give the context of what
Yes.
was going on. So um, Spain lived under one dictator, one language, one religion. Under the dictatorship, only Catholicism was allowed.
Hmm.
If you practice any other religion until the late 60s, you were put in jail or persecuted. So the far right, they say it bluntly. We need to go back to Franquismo. El Franquismo is Franco is Frankism.
Hmm.
Frankism is like one religion, one nationalistic identity, and one language, which is Spanish. Catalan, the Basque, the Galicians, etc. They need to speak only Spanish and teach their kids just Spanish, no other language. So that um, you know effort to make Spain homogeneous is clearly present in their discourse. However, sometimes they see that that's absolutely impossible. The Catalan are not going to negotiate that. The
Yes.
Basque are not going to. So who are we going to blame for the deterioration of our identity, etc.? The Muslims, the
Hmm.
migrant, etc. Because that's the easy one to blame. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's very present in their discourse, blaming Muslims for their lack of achievements, for their incapacity to achieve that homogenous nationalistic identity here in Spain.
Which is
But
detrimental to Spain if they ever succeed.
absolutely,
Yes.
that's a catastrophe if it happens, and it's not going to happen. People vote for them, but they're not completely convinced of that other agenda. They
Hmm.
vote for them. For example, when it comes to immigration, they want to expel all Muslims. They even sometimes they have said it escaped
It slipped out.
their
Yeah.
mouths, yeah, from time to time. But normally they say, no, 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 we need to expel illegal immigrants. People that came here illegally need to be taken back where they came from. So people vote for them for that, because of that. However, behind the scenes, their agenda and their project is to fight and expel Muslims as a whole and deny Muslims any religious rights here in Spain. Um, to just conclude this, they're not going to be able to do that, in my view.
Sure.
However, the harm is done. Their
Hmm.
discourse does a lot of harm. And I think, and I have called for this, the Spanish government and, security forces here in Spain need to go a step further, because hate speech should not be tolerated to this degree, they need to cut back on any funding, any financial backing from within Spain or outside of this country that is creating a very
But
divisive
don't you think that would
discourse.
create a vacuum? Once you start targeting them in like financial, don't you think it would start targeting them as like an opportunity to say that they are victims, but rather challenging the ideology would be much more. But since you're in power, since the not you're in power, I mean, in the sense like the left is in power and it's more
Yeah.
sympathetic to your views, don't you think challenging that would be much more efficient? To debunk their theories either through giving more time on television or what do you call having city or like perhaps even celebrating Eid. I am sure that you don't have Eid Day as a holiday, like
We do
opening up
have it.
spaces for Muslims.
We do have it.
Oh, you have it. Nice,
Here in
mashallah.
Spain, seven Muslim holidays are recognized by the law. So you have the right to ask for that day off at school, at university, or at your workplace.
We have only two.
Yeah, so
Seven?
the two Eids
Eight.
plus holidays. Like, for example, you have the Mawlid is
Okay.
recognized not as a Eid, but as a holiday.
Okay.
The Isra and the Mi'raj, they have like seven different holidays. All the two Eids plus other holidays are recognized, seven in
Most
total.
important for us is the Laylatul Qadr night, right?
Jum'ah prayer, the
Hmm.
Jum'ah prayer, you can take those hours off
Oh,
from work and go pray
they're
at your local
pretty
mosque.
friendly compared to the
And
other
this was
European
signed,
countries.
and this was signed in 1992. To be fair, well, in 1992, Felipe González was the Spanish president here, president of the Spanish government. We are a monarchy. We have a king, but you have the president of the government here in Spain. Felipe González was also a leftist, and the relationship with the Muslim community was pretty good, and also with the Muslim world was absolutely outstanding in comparison with the rest of Europe. And to be fair, in 1992, they gave some very advanced rights for Muslims. And today, I would say that Muslims here in Spain have two main things in their favor. First, they have a recognized legal framework for their religious rights and liberties. You don't have that in the UK. You don't have a law that protects the rights of Muslims and singles them out as a community with specific rights. You
Hmm.
do have that in Spain, and that's singular thing in the West. You don't have
Hmm.
another country like that. Maybe something similar or close to that. You have it in Austria. Okay.
Yes.
Second, you have a unified representative or representativeness of Muslims here in Spain. You have one single institution that represents Muslims before the administration here in Spain. Within that umbrella or under that umbrella, you have different federations, communities, etc. That's fine. Diversity within the Muslim community. When it comes to uh, you know communicating with the
Hmm.
administration, you have
There is
one
an
single
organization.
entity, which is the Islamic Commission of Spain. I am part of it. I am one of its members, and it's unified, and that's hugely favorable for Muslims here in Spain. You don't have that kind of division that you see in the US and the UK and other countries. Two people, speaking on behalf of Muslims, yeah, and conflicting messages, etc. So you do have a lot of elements in favor of Islam and Muslims here in Spain.
This should be
So we need to just
utilized for Muslims to,
exactly. It needs to be utilized
So inshallah, maybe we'll
widely.
discuss about the pathway, how to
Inshallah.
improvise this jewel in your hand to.
Yeah. And also, the percentage of people that show their intent to vote for the extreme right are not militants of the
Mhm.
extreme right. Just like they were shifted towards them, they
It
can
can come back.
also be convinced to do the same thing in the opposite direction. We just need to be intelligent about it and have more outlets in order to communicate this message, which normalizes Islam and Muslims and
This is
debunks
dawah. This is basically dawah, as you say at the beginning, right?
debunks all the exaggerations, the fake news, the hoaxes, etc., that the far right is spewing within the Spanish society. That's our main objective. Yeah.
Inshallah. May Allah make your efforts rewardable and also
I mean,
bless your works and increase in it.
I mean,
So inshallah, barakallah feek for coming, and inshallah hope everyone benefits from your works and also from this podcast, inshallah.
inshallah. Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that what we have discussed gives a somewhat of a more deep view of the history of Islam of Muslims here in Spain. And inshallah, together we can work for the normalization of Islam within Europe, inshallah. Bihawnillah.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Jazakallah
So,
khair.
Jazakallah khair, Barakallahu fiqh, and I'll put your link, your works and
Jazakallah.
your links in the description. Barakallahu
My
khair.
pleasure. Barakallahu
Assalamu
feekum.
alaikum warahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.